He had never had much patience for religion. What was it, after all, but superstition with money? Late last night, I finished The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, and this was by far my most anticipated new release for 2025. Joe Abercrombie is one of my favorite authors of all time, and I think he is by far the best working fantasy author out there right now, in my humble opinion. So coming into this, I had a lot of hype, but I was also kind of worried because I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. From what I had read online, this is very different than First Law, which I adore. It's much more action and comedy based, and just less cynical in general was what kind of I saw in the reviews. And it seemed like some people really, really liked this book, and for some people it just didn't work for them as much as other Joe Abercrombie books. For me, though, I'm happy to report I really, really liked it, and I think it's one of Joe Abercrombie's best that I've read. This is a very strong start to this trilogy, and it is, in my opinion, that if he can keep up the momentum for the next two books or improve, this will be better than the First Law trilogy by him. I like pretty much everything about this book more than I liked about the Blade itself. I think that this is a much stronger introduction. I think the character work so far has been much stronger. I thought the plot and the pacing was much stronger. I thought the humor was better. So this is just so good. So if you've been living under a rock for like the last year or whatever, The Devils is essentially about a group of monsters who are chained by this little girl pope who's like 10 years old in order to do good things in the name of the church and in the name of God. It's fantasy Suicide Squad. And for some people, maybe that's an immediate turnoff. They don't want fantasy Suicide Squad. But I personally am a huge fan of Suicide Squad. It's one of my favorite groups in all of comics. So going into this, having that expectation of, it's Joe Abercrombie, and it's Suicide Squad, and it's fantasy, and it's in alternative Europe, I was ready. I think that the premise here is really fun. I think that the plot here was really solid. I liked how there are these just like objectively really bad people. We're talking like a bloodthirsty vampire, horrible transforming Viking werewolf, an invisible elf, knight who can never die, and just like the worst group of people ever doing good. I'm always a fan of that like premise, and that's exactly what's going on here. Like the goal here in this book is for the Devils to install this princess in order to unite Europe against the elven threat, because in this alternative Europe and in this story, the elves are bloodthirsty maniacs, because of course they are. Joe Abercrombie cannot possibly write a traditional fantasy story. I don't think it's possible for him. This book definitely feels like kind of like more D&D-esque than First Law. And that is not me complaining, by the way, but just you kind of have like a class for each character. One's the invisible elf that's like different from the rest of a race. One's the bloodthirsty savage werewolf. One's the broken knight who can never die. Another's like the wizard guy, and the other one's like the charismatic jack of all trades person, the one that's kind of got all the experience. And with that, like I just felt like the dynamic here was really, really fun. It feels very found family. It feels like just the misbehaved children who first hate each other and then they grow to respect and love one another, and their banter back and forth is just incredible. I think the character writing here is some of Joe Abercrombie's best, with some new additional favorites of mine. Vigga and Sunny are some of my new favorite characters in fantasy. They are hilarious, especially Vigga, who is my girl. But yeah, character work here is just great. I think overall, this is off to a much stronger start. I think the cast here has potential to be much, much better than First Law, and I enjoyed them much more than First Law. This is definitely way less cynical. This feels more upbeat. This feels, despite a lot of the dark stuff that happens in this book, pretty, this is not like a happy-go-lucky book. This is not something where it's like, man, that was really cheerful to read, and I feel so energized. But you're going to be laughing a lot, and you're going to be enjoying yourself a lot with this book, because it's packed with comedy, it's packed with action. I feel like there isn't a lot of downtime in this book. From the moment it starts to the moment it ends, there's always something happening. And I really appreciate that, because as much as I love a book that takes its time in its telling, sometimes I just want to read a fast-paced, action-heavy, funny fantasy book, and that is exactly what Joe Abercrombie delivered here. The character work is awesome, the plot is awesome, the pacing is awesome. I love just how this was written. I love the alternative Europe and all its hints. I hope that Joe kind of builds up on that world building. That's not exactly what he's known for, but I'd like to see a little bit more. And I like that, it seems like moving forward there's going to be a lot more to explore. So my only negative is that I thought the ending was a little weak, but it's obviously part one of a larger arc. So I'm excited for the rest. I'm going to give it an 8.8 out of 10. And I adored this. This was a lot of fun. So if you're a fan of Joe Abercrombie, check this out. And even if you've never read any Joe Abercrombie, I think this would actually be a great introduction to his style, because it's a little less cynical, it's a little bit more funny, it's a little bit more traditional fantasy D&D-esque than First Law is. So highly recommend this one.